So Karen, you're very, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dara. It's gorgeous to be here.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to having this conversation. It's one that I've wanted to have for, a long time now, because I kind of came across your work probably maybe 2 years ago, I'd say.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, I've just been really so curious to kind of see your journey online and the work that you're doing here in Ireland around, shame and sexuality and consent. It's kind of an area that I've been so curious about the last number of years, mainly because of the work I do with men and how absent it's been in this country for such a
Mm.
long time. So yeah, I'm just really so curious. Like, what really inspired you to become a somatic sexologist and embodiment consent coach?
Mm. Yeah, I suppose the journey has woven through many threads of my life. And I guess it's something that started like two decades ago, like 20 years ago, when I was a full-time acupuncturist over in the West, and I had my own center there, the Hawthorne Clinic, and would have worked with, people just coming in the clinic door, and then would have come to a stage where I wanted to make it more accessible and working with marginalized groups. So worked with
Mm.
people who had a status of HIV and AIDS, and also worked in the Simon community. So I was working in these places for over 5 years and came across a lot around shame and around sexuality and conditioning and beliefs. So I guess that took me on a journey of integrating the work of Byron Katie, which I studied for 10 years, and wove that in through my work with acupuncture. And beautifully then relocated over to the southeast over 10 years ago, and took a pause in my acupuncture world. I absolutely loved, ate, drank Chinese medicine, was studied, was a Tai Chi practitioner for over 7 years as well, so was kind of really integrated with all of those parts, but then came over here and took a pause, and um ended up taking some voluntary work in a social care environment, which was Waldorf Rudolf Steiner um, informed. And so, anyway, a long story short, I started to work there and did a degree in social studies, specializing in disability. And within that, I became a behavior practitioner. So I specialize working with people with um, challenging behavior and sexuality, and worked with teams, staff teams, around low arousal approach to challenging behavior. So noticing the thread again of sexuality, the shame that we have, that staff teams had, and nervous system regulation. I suppose it's also been a big theme. So, um, yeah, the threads all the way through there. And then finally, when I did resign from that, I had started my own journey 7 years ago around my own sexuality and reclamation of my own sensuality, and learning that I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and so I went into quite a deep dive with, solo tantra, just really looking at the energetic system as well around our sexuality and life force and chi. And um yeah, I suppose it was quite an evolution of my own understanding of my body and my conditioning, and bring it into the body. So the inquiry piece was amazing for looking at the mind and the beliefs and things, and then bringing it into the body, the somatic side of things. So it was a few years ago when I came across the Wheel of Consent, which kind of was mind blowing. So again, a part of
Love
my
that.
education that I didn't come across. Consent was something I saw at the bottom of cookies, data, like consent, and I don't even know what that means. So bringing it into myself. So again, studying somatic sexology for the last 3 years, and then deeper diving into professional training with the Wheel of Consent. I get quite nerdy. When I get into something, I go deep. I want to, kind of absorb and embody everything. Um, so yeah, the threads were woven since the beginning. There wasn't since I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a somatic sexologist. No, I do remember actually when I was about 15, seeing Billy Connolly's wife at the time, or I think current wife still, and she was a sexologist. And I remember just going, what? The
Mm.
astounded that there was something called a sexologist and sex therapist, when I was 14, 15 in the 80s, 90s. So yeah.
Wow, beautiful. Oh, yeah,
Mm.
love that journey. Yeah, kind of similar to myself. I didn't have so much awareness about the world of sexuality until I started to really dive deeper into it 6 or 7 years ago. And it's kind of that classic thing, if you just don't have the awareness of it, you don't know it exists. And then when you open that box, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? But in the best possible way.
Mm.
Um, I think I've had so many conversations around, people having barely any education around consent or sexuality or
Mm.
sensuality even. We get that one class maybe in transition year, where you learn a few things, or very minimal kind of amount that we learn in primary school. And I know things are changing for the better, and because of people like you, which is wonderful. Um yeah, but I see those kind of threads of, working with the body very early on. This kind of acupuncture, tai chi, you were very in touch with the body, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel that your relationship maybe to the body has changed over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I notice with my own body, I have more self-trust in my body. I've more
Mm,
feeling a sense of safety. And it's only in the last kind of 5 years since I've been doing deep nervous system regulation and consent work, embodying consent work, that I realize how much fear I did have in the body, how much
mm,
insecurity I had as a woman growing up in Ireland, and not really knowing my agency or voice around relationships or yeah. So yeah, my relationship, I just feel it's changed. Of course, I'm heading towards 50, so there's been lots of interesting changes, which has been another revelation. But also I think I've never felt so delicious and
mm.
fabulous in myself, with a really grounded joy.
Love that.
Yeah, and that's phenomenal because I look back at photographs of myself and I was a slip of a thing, and like when I look, I'm going, God, I was such a hot, hot thing. But I was so insecure. I was so
Yeah.
self-conscious. I was so not in my power. So the power bit, stepping into my personal power is directly related to the sense of safety and trust I feel in my
Mm,
body. And I suppose that's the thing that I support people with a lot, with that felt sense of safety. How do they know they feel safe? What are all their nervous system tools? Their somatic yes and no,
mhm.
which are the missing piece for my generation below and above around sex education. Mm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember when I heard about, connecting to your full body yes a number of years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot find that in my body. I thought this was so bizarre. And it wasn't really
Mm.
until I came across, the Wheel of Consent, the work of Betty Martin as well, that I was kind of like,
Yeah.
why isn't everybody learning this from the age of 4, you
Mm.
know? Um, and what I suppose the question I'd love to ask you, kind of get out the gate, would be, what is embodied consent to you?
Mm. So, embodied consent, yeah, is this complete trust and valuing our body signatures. Our body's communicating with us the whole time. And we're so great for dismissing denial and shoving it away. And it's something that we've been conditioned to do since we were children, because it's usually primary carers who have told us, like, no, no, you will finish your dinner. No, no, it's time to go to bed. And our bodies are like, no, it's not. I'm actually full. So we push down all these signatures. So the radicalness of actually noticing what's going on in our body, slowing down and trusting and valuing these messages, and then taking action for them. that they
Mhm.
matter. So the embodied consent is out of the mind. It's unifying the mind as well, but our minds and our logical brain, I found personally and professionally, they're quite strategic. So we might say yes when we mean no because we want someone to really like us.
Yeah.
We might, or we might say no when we really want yes because we don't know how to say no to stop after a certain length of time. And this is in every single relationships, not just in, sensual sexual partnership. So yeah, it's the trusting piece, and getting really nuanced, and that your limits, your needs matter as well, because that's one thing I found that um m- myself, but also my clients, that knowing what you want and desire is a mystery. Like total, like, what are you talking about? What? And then looking to see, like, well, what do you want me to want? And desire. So I see us as a beautiful land of recovering people pleasers.
Yeah.
And I've walked this path, staggered this path of recovering people pleaser.
Me too.
Oh, oh, recovering people pleaser. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've come across, No More Mr. Nice Guy, this book by Robert Glover. I always recommend it to men, where
Mhm.
we we're brought up not to, take care of our needs. A lot of us in Ireland are brought up not to assert our boundaries,
Mm.
to articulate our desires and wants. And you're kind of right. It can be kind of so empowering to do that. Um, and there's a piece there for me around safety. What do people need to feel kind of like safe in the body so they can start to access this yes and this no?
Mm. It can be different for different people, in my experience, but it's getting to know their own internal landscape.
Hmm.
It's getting to know all the things they need to soothe themselves, prepare themselves, nourish themselves, and self care. Um, and a lot of them are sensory things. Like doing yoga, doing breath work, you know, body brushing, having good naps, all these resourcing tools that we do that we often, again, have been functioned to, in a world that operates out of deadlines, goals, very speedy. And so getting to know what you need in a moment in life to show up with full capacity. I think,
Mm,
we've also been modeled the martyr and the overserver,
yeah,
beautifully by our religion and culture and families.
totally.
So, again, it feels very edgy for people to prioritize themselves, to
Yeah.
nurture and nourish their nervous system so they know when they are at their limit to not feeling safe. To
Hmm.
And then and then you go into a different, a nervous system that's going to want you to fucking leg it or fight or freeze, or so it's yeah, some of them are very simple tools, and they're also not like an overnight life hack. I
Yeah.
see for a lot of my clients, it's a 3-month kind of ongoing tending to the nervous system,
Mm,
because most of us have been in this hyper vigilant um, programming and bodily experience. So it's rewiring our systems into ah
yeah.
deep breaths and going, right, I'm okay.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, and I absolutely love that. And I think with like, as well in society with this kind of the martyr and the overgiver, it's kind of like I suppose the shadow side is that people kind of get their sense of self-worth or purpose or fulfillment in the world by being in that kind of being in that space, and then that
Mm,
can just foster resentment. I think if it's not received or appreciated,
mm.
um, and I definitely see that in a lot of people, especially when people start to hit kind of like mid age when kids start to leave, and then they realize they've given so much, but they haven't filled their own cup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, part of I think is the conditioning of people just signing up to things that, oh, it's someone else's voice in the room that you should be doing this, and by this age you should have this, this, and this. And people
Yeah.
work their asses off with very little love and life force energy for what they're doing, because it's usually striving for something, a position, a status, material, something. And then it is this like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And, you know, um, the overserver piece is, yeah, we end up giving to get, this transactional piece with our bodies and with each other, and without communication, without navigating our limits and our capacity for giving with a generous heart, that it's a mutual reciprocal, nourishing interaction. So yeah, I see a lot of people coming to my clinic, and they're drained, they're knackered, they're bored of their own sex life with
Mm.
themselves, habitual ways of masturbating with their relationships, in their partnerships. So yeah, and it's like there has to be more. Like, come on, I've just done everything that I was told to do in the book of adulting, and now I'm like, what the fuck,
Yeah.
So the nourishment piece and the stepping out of the overserving is huge. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think what I see is a lot, like life can become very conditional or very transactional. If I do this for you, you do this for me, and then
Mm.
it's like, then it's done. And it's
And and it's the note taking. I did that the other day, and you didn't get back. So there is this
yeah,
like,
tit for tat.
oh
You
my
know.
god, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, one of the pieces you've been touching on there is like kind of around like the kind of somatics of it all, the somatic work and the nervous system regulation. And this is also an area that was really blown my mind over the last number of years as well. And I think when it comes to work of sexuality, that this is so important. I
Mm.
see in working with psychedelics that you know, people kind of almost sometimes blow their nervous system out of the water. And same in the men's work, it's like kind of people are forced into this like, oh, you need to have this like huge catharsis in order to find healing. But I found on my own journey that, I did a lot of the big cathartic stuff around sexuality, releasing the shame, the anger, the guilt in these big
Mm.
ways. But I think, there can be so much power in moving into this work with a kind of more of a relaxed nervous system and, working on a more like intuitive, somatic way where you're not kind of like blasting your whole nervous system into the fight or flight. Can you kind
Mm.
of speak into a little bit of that maybe and the kind of this somatic work in the context of sexuality?
Mm. Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up. And yeah, my own personal journey on my discovery path was very dysregulated. When I started tuning into my sexuality and sensuality, yeah, the 7 years ago, I was very focused and I was a very good student of myself. But I kept noticing that I kept getting dysregulated, which brought me into noticing how was with my body, with my sensuality, with my genitals, and this transactional piece, so I work a lot around self-consenting touch, and then the whole nervous system regulation so that we can slow down, and this sustainable movement. Yeah, it brings us more into an intuition and attunement to our body's rhythm, so the slowest part of our body becoming the slowest, part of us, that's outside of goal orientation, ejaculation or orgasm, totally transforms, and maybe our notions of what sex is, because it's so expansive and so rich. Yeah, when we slow down. Um And yeah, it's the rhythm of our bodies, like our bodies' rhythm and the rhythm of nature is a lot slower than what we're going at. And I think we see the effects of this very fast paced life. with the world, with the resources that is being drained, and the same with ourselves, these expectations and this demand that we have on our bodies um, to get somewhere.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'm not sure, does that answer your question?
No, yeah, no, I totally resonate with that, and I think what I've noticed is that women are so much better at slowing down than men. It's almost the constant feedback to the guys, you know?
Mm, yeah.
Do you think that's kinda like, I feel like we live in this very, like, masculine world almost. It's, you know, almost no time for rest, productivity, produce,
Mm,
capitalism, it's constant go, and I think, you know, the feminine, to use that terminology, kinda is so much better at, taking the rest and the breaks and slowing down and being more in tune with the body and listening to those kind of signatures. Is that kind of what you also would agree with?
yeah, I think so. I think there is maybe cycles within a woman's system that aids rest or requires rest, even though I also see, and myself included, have worked in a very operational, functional, goal orientated way, So um I think there's amazing men on this land doing incredible work around this slowing down and for men to drop into their emotions and their bodies. So I see there's a catch up. I think women have been fortunate with maybe having more community, more emotional um conversations, feelings. We're kind of innately tuned into that aspect of ourselves more than men. Men were told to get on with it and man up, and so
Yeah.
I think the slowing down aspect is coming in beautifully. And with your own work included, I see the amazing work you're doing.
No, thanks. Yeah, and it's kind of like there's a hunger for it out there, and I think there's a hunger for it because of,
Really?
burnout pretty much, It's
Yeah.
it's it's not sustainable, and I think people are really realizing how, life isn't sustainable in the way that they're living, and it's causing these kind of deeper issues, burnout, disease, outbursts of anger, of
Mm,
distrust against the world. And, I think for men it's such a powerful journey to just slow everything down. And I think one of the best thing that I can one of the best bits of advice I can offer to a lot of men is, give yourself space, stillness, and silence, which is a very, very hard thing to do for people who live this kind of go, go, go doing life.
mm,
Um, and for me in my own journey, I think, having that time where I just stopped, took a breath. I was like, oh my God, there's so much going on. And, it kind
right.
of allowed me to uh, access deeper parts of myself and process things and work on things and realize
Um,
how dysregulated I was, how dysregulated my nervous system was. I was so anxious. I was a high functioning anxious person. I was just running on caffeine and, productivity, and
like,
it caused me to get to a space where, my body was telling me to stop, and if I wasn't stopping, I was, being given the worst signals of pain and suffering in the body.
yeah. We're so lucky to have our body.
Yeah.
It's it's like alarm bells, giving us so many signatures the whole time, and
Mm,
amazing that, yeah, it's our relationship, because I see the relationship we have, we often have a power over on our bodies, and if you consider we have been born into systems of power over, not power with, our
mm,
educational system, our medical, judicial, religious, are all power over. So it's quite radical and political, to step out of that for ourselves, because we are quite demanding and power over with our bodies, like, do this, that, keep going until I tell you to stop. So
mm.
it's a wonder that our bodies are still knocking around with us. It's like until we listen, it's like, when are you
Yeah,
gonna cop on? Yeah.
yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I saw a post the other day, was like 12 things that's written in Sanskrit rules, and the first one was like, "You will have a body," and it's like people just skip that so much.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
body's totally left out in the dark. But I've really noticed in the last 4 years in men's work, all across the world, and uh, you know spiritual and personal development. This idea of embodiment, nervous system
Mm.
regulation, polyvagal theory. Connecting to deep intuition. Um, it's really getting its moment in the limelight. And
Mm.
I've always said to guys, if you feel like your body isn't in good shape, you'll go to the gym. And why don't you also take the space to connect to like deeper self-care, if your body's not in a good shape, or your mind is not in a good shape, like why won't you slow
Mm.
down and do the things to make sure that you have a healthy nervous system, and that it's also, fine-tuned, similar to, working your muscles. Why don't you also work the mind? Why don't you work the nervous system?
Mm.
And why don't you, move the energy through the body as well? Um, yeah,
Yeah, and again, I think it's something around the education piece around our self-worth of, that our domain is our body, our thoughts, our boundaries, our pleasure. We have a right and a responsibility to take action to meet these needs. And that's really wrapped up in our self-worthiness. And I see
yeah,
that a lot, people just even naming their wants and desires, but also like taking responsibility for their bodies outside of an aesthetic look, for
100%.
someone else's gaze or approval or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
this kind of thing again of doing it for the other rather than for yourself.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely see it from a the history of people who have Irish heritage, who've grown up here, taking ownership and stepping into these parts of us, have they haven't been fostered or encouraged. It's you know eh, to be seen and to be heard and to be in your body and to be in your power has you know was a life threat. So it's, I think, intergenerationally we still have picked up these messages of that it's not safe to be in your body and it's not safe to be in your emotions. So it's
yeah, yeah, definitely. I have a lot of questions on the Irish psyche towards the end, or sexuality. So
oh god.
we'll definitely come back to it, because for me it's just like such a mystery, because I've done so much of my sexuality work internationally. Um, and a lot of people even say to me, "God, I didn't even think you're Irish." I didn't think you're from Ireland, just because, I really was like, "Oh shit, I really need to get rid of this stuff pretty quickly."
Yeah.
you know, um, you know, it was so funny. Some of my, early work, around embodiment and sexuality, was in these spaces, and I could just instantly spot the Irish people and the British
Oh.
people. They're stiff as boards, hands by the sides,
Hmm.
so standoffish. And then you see like the Latinos or the
Yeah.
Spanish, and they're just like flowing all around the place. I'm like, oh Jesus, what have I got myself in for? But
Yeah.
being able to release those shackles has been so empowering
Yeah.
and beautiful. It's opened up such use the word juicy and joyous and luscious and wonderful life. But
Mm.
yeah, maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later on. But I think there's a piece there around shame for me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, how do you feel like working with the body helps to heal shame, and also trauma around sexuality? I think so many people
Mm.
have been traumatized in the world of sexuality,
Mm.
sensuality, and you know kind of coming back to that piece around not feeling safe in our body,
Mm.
not feeling that we can, articulate our needs and maybe share our boundaries out of maybe feeling shameful around it. Kind of like that phrase comes to mind, early conditioning, children are kind of, seen and not heard, so we couldn't
Mm.
articulate our needs or our desires or our boundaries
Mm.
because, it wasn't acceptable, and that therefore we were put into a shameful space if we did.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'd love to unpack that a little bit with you.
Yeah.
Lots in there.
Yeah, like, when I meet people from other parts of the world and, they hear what I do, somatic sexology, and I'm in Ireland, and they're like, "Whoa, you must do a lot of work over there on shame." So, yeah, no, it is such, a strong, inheritance, and, for me, shame is a learned behavior mixed with emotion that's wrapped up in our self-worth and our belonging to ourselves and with another. So, I worked a lot with it through the mind, through the conditioning, early on when I was doing the work of Byron Katie, and that was amazing to unpack who else is in the room, whose voice is that. And then working, the two-prong approach that I have is through the body somatically and recognizing the universal signatures of shame. And I very somatic practices to support someone to move through the shame in a titrated way that supports the nervous system so it doesn't blow your head off and
Yeah,
spiral you back into re-trauma or shame, as well for, because often we feel shame for shame.
yeah.
Um, but it's really powerful, working with people around sexuality and their shame. And it's like, yeah, the experiences that I've seen from people, and the reflections are it is this like throwing off this cloak, this really heavy cloak that does liberate and, you know, yeah, brings a life of joy and juiciness. Um, yeah,
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
sure. Did I answer that fully
yeah,
there? I got
no,
sidetracked.
no, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Mm,
I totally get that. And shame for me is one of those like really tricky ones to catch, to access, because I think it's so deep in there in the unconscious, of you know
mm,
how we behave. Is it driven through like fear or shame? Um, and I see it's some of the most liberating and powerful work we can do.
mm,
And
mm,
I find in my work with men, it's like it creates like a loneliness. It really creates this kind of like, I'm inherently bad. I did something bad. I'm
mm,
I'm inherently, sinful, for example, in Ireland.
mm.
And that creates a space where people, I feel, withdrawn to themselves and feel like they're the only one.
Yeah.
And I 100% think shame contributes to, suicide in the world, where people feel, oh, whatever has happened to me or I've done is so nasty and bad that, I
Mm,
could never ever voice this or share it.
mm,
And, in the world of sexuality, you're so right that, um, the kind of the potential for re-traumatization, or I don't know if this even a word, shamatization, is so great
mm.
that, it needs to be, shame a- in the sexuality sphere needs to be treated with such tenderness.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, no, like, I take my work very seriously with around sexuality, just, seeing that it's the most shamed part of us, the most stigmatized, the most disconnected from us, we're the most disembodied from this part of our lives, so I take it really seriously with, um, the reverence and the professionality and how to work with it ethically, and be accountable, um, to be equipped to work with our sexuality and with shame. This is the part where we've been absolutely, you know, desecrated from.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I can't remember now what I was gonna say.
Oh, good.
I'm going to take a
Um,
breath.
yeah, we'll take a breath. It's
Ah,
always good.
yeah.
And mm, so, what would my next question be? Yeah, what would be some of the kind of like key practices or tools that you would help individuals
Mm.
uh, begin with, kind of to process this kind of trauma and shame around sexuality in the
Um,
body?
The tools that I'd use, I suppose every session is totally different and every person is totally different. And it's usually like the trifecta that I work with specifically is somatic sexology, inquiry, and embodied consent. So I weave the three of those things in my sessions. Um, and body focusing and body awareness. Like I do this thing around, the unvoiced voices of the body. So allowing the emergence of the they're known voices, but they're being hidden. Again, just this stabilizing and this trusting of the voices of the signatures, communications of the body. So we begin to listen and self trust. So the embodied consent piece is huge
Mm,
to develop a secure attachment for and with the body, and advocate for it. So once that, is a solid base, then we can move into more of the practices of titration off the seashore into the water, even if it's just ankle deep. And as you said, like shame loves to hide, loves secrecy, and therefore perpetuates the isolation and disconnect we feel from ourselves, our worthiness, our belonging to ourself, to the body, our right to be here, as well as to others. So
mm.
yeah, the foundational piece would definitely be settling and developing a secure attachment with the body. Mm.
Well, I love that. I never really thought about having a secure attachment to your own body. I love this, attachment theory and relationships, anxious partners, and push and pull dynamics. But I never thought about your own body. That's a
I
definitely,
know.
yeah, wonderful way to think about it. I love that quote as well. Shame dies in, or shame heals when being shared in safe spaces. And I can imagine
Mhm.
that's a lot of your work as well. Is holding space for these things to be voiced and then kind of metabolizing that shame.
Yeah. Yeah, metabolizing, that's super important, like the integration piece and doing it in these small episodes of experience. So it doesn't again blow us apart, because
Yeah.
we've done the cathartic things and they've worked in some ways. I've experienced a lot of catharsis and I've willingly gone into the depths of the fire. And yeah, I think now for me, definitely I see the benefit of slow, sustainable titrations into these parts of us, these exile parts of us that
Yeah.
are terrifying, and having all the toolboxes and all the support and love for yourself, in your secure
Mm.
attachment. Oh, yeah, look, just holding my clitoris, my cousin clitoris.
I love that. That's great.
Like,
Your anchor.
it's my I have a little demo of clitoris, my golden vulva. So
Oh wow, I love it. That's great.
something I'm just like holding my secure attachment with my clitoris
Oh
while we're
wow, I love
chatting.
it. I love it. That's like it's a really big one for guys as well. I always do meditations with men, and I kind of say like connect into your head, connect into your throat, throat chakra. You speak your truth, heart. How's your heart feeling? What are you holding on your heart? What are you doing? And then I say like get down into your balls. Feel your balls. What are your balls
Yeah.
telling you? What's the your kind of like intuition? What's like driving you?
Mm.
And a lot of guys always say, "Shit, I never feel my balls."
Mm. Yeah. Oh man, it's so brilliant. Yeah, I do the very same. When I do a body scan, I invite self-touch. And it's
Mm,
always like bring your hands with no, to various parts of the body. You have a right and responsibility for this body, but with no agenda, just feeling the warmth, the heaviness, just the taboo of that, maybe doing it in a space in a workshop or something, and bringing your hands to your crotch, genitals, asshole. It's radical for people. They're like, oh my God, if anyone saw me, or, and again, the shame that, like, what if people see me touching, are they going to think I'm a pervert? And it's like, it's your body. You're just putting your hands on it with
yeah,
no agenda to change anything. And often a lot of emotion can come up of, that permission that, ah, I have a right to put my hands. It's my
yeah,
domain. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's like for me, I can speak for myself, my own lived experience around reclaiming my power. through
Mm.
accessing pleasure through different parts of my body. And even I remember my first self pleasure practice when I kind of reorientated it from like an instant gratification to a deeper practice
Mm.
of self love and connection to my body
Yeah.
and to sensuality was absolutely massive for me. It's like, whoa, how have I ignored, all this pleasure in my legs or in my arms or in my chest? And, you know, I,
Yeah.
I hear this from, female clients I work with. They're like, he just wants me to just get straight down into, touching his lingam or cock or whatever. And
Mm.
it's like, there's no access to other parts. Do you see that
Yeah.
in your work with men as well? It's like they're just so, phallic focused.
Yeah, but I think, there's been a conditioning, that, that's just going for the penis cocker, that's the only function that a man has, so it's being very narrowed down
Yeah,
to what they're here for others and for their own pleasure as well. But yeah, the slowing down I think is again this radical political thing because um yeah, when we slow down, we feel more, and we've spent decades trying not to feel our feelings. So
yeah,
it is quite, yeah, they can be met with a lot of resistance. But like half my clients are men, and um, they're so ready for self nurturing, for engaging with themselves in a different way that to what they have been conditioned to for themselves. So that's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah. No, absolutely. And I
Mm.
love, I love this work around sovereignty and kind of empowerment and like owning your own body and how you feel and what you want to do with your body. And the women have been great with this, particularly around like abortion, like my body my choice.
Mm.
um and I think it's such an area that's overlooked with men. It's like, like being
Mm.
able to take ownership and control and re-empowering yourself and realizing the conditioning that has been put on through, in Ireland, Catholicism
Yeah.
and the shame, and that kind of disconnection, I think can be huge for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, there's a lot of amazing shifts going on, I think, at the moment for the better. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really beautiful.
Mm.
One of the things I want to touch on, and you kind of shared around it at the start, around you being in these kind of you know different spaces and trying to create more inclusive spaces.
Mm.
Um, how do you feel that influences your work today? Like how do you create this kind of inclusivity in the work that you do?
Mm. Um, the I guess the inclusivity that I kind of speak about is the all parts of us, our mind, our hearts, our bodies, our sexuality. Um, and I see a lot of commonality between all of us more than differences. So the inclusivity is like all bodies are welcome, all genders are
Yeah.
welcome, and wheelchair accessible and seating arrangements that's not you don't have to sit lotus position on of a yoga mat. Just that it's inclusive for um different genital configurations and body types. Um and yeah, for me, the embracing all parts of us, the inclusivity of our bodies, the voices of our bodies, of our hearts, of our genitals, and
Uh,
the unification of all these parts are our sex, our gut, our intuition, our brain gut, our heart, our mind, and not excluding the mind because our minds are fucking fantastic.
yeah.
So it's all of that, not just like you have to stay in your yoni now forever. Now that you've connected with it, it's like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. We need all parts of us. That's what it is to be holistic and occupy all of yourself, a
Mm,
full human.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so important. And I think especially in these times when, a lot of people are also exploring um, different parts of themselves through different avenues of sexuality, and people who are neurodivergent or kind of
Mm.
have maybe, shame or fear of judgment around, showing up as a certain way in a circle or a group. And I find that this is quite a hot topic in men's work at the moment, especially around the LGBT community, where like a lot of these kind of groups are all just like white, straight men, and it's like, oh, can I show up to this space because I'm pansexual or
Mm.
bisexual, or actually, I don't know whether I don't know whether I am masculine or if I'm feminine or if I have either of them, so
Mhm.
I
Mm.
find this piece of inclusivity, and making sure people don't feel or don't feel excluded, I think is really really important.
Mm. Yeah, and like, polarity work does lean towards quite, like gender normative ways of being, and it's important, and I think it's great that people are going into spaces where there is, all men going to men's work, and I think that's amazing, and similarly with women and stuff, and again, I think I come from a place myself with a little bit shedding those limitations maybe. Um,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
also have an experience
Mm,
from my own way of experiencing life in this body with this, you know, these blinkers. So, I think we also can create spaces for people to feel comfortable in. We don't necessarily, when I go into men's group workshops, which I've done quite recently in the last while, I kind of name it going, I'm the only person who may not have a penis. I have no idea what it's like to live life with an embodied physical penis. So I don't know what your experiences is, but like I equally don't know what the experience of another female
mm.
bodied person is either. So um yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I love that, and I think I'm also very curious about this polarity world, because it's also getting a bit of a moment again.
Mm.
These kind of older teachings of like David Deida, and if you look at them now, they're kind of a little bit dated.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Um, and this kind of like binary approach. It's like I'm masculine or I'm feminine, and I need to be in the feminine pole so that he can be more masculine and create the
Mhm.
chemistry and sexuality. And then, some women find like, I don't want to be in this feminine surrender, he's leading pole. That's quite disempowering,
Mm.
I've had some great conversations around these kind of things with people. Can you speak more into, yeah, maybe those thoughts?
Mm. Yeah, I suppose similarly, I would have experienced quite a lot of those over the last few years as well, and they're interesting and they have some value, and they have definitely grown parts of me in myself. When I discovered, um, my own internal masculine, that several years ago, my sword and my shield and all of this kind of thing,
Yeah,
it was phenomenal to go, oh dear God, I've got my own back, and, that was beautiful. And yeah, I suppose I don't get stuck on the labeling of that.
yeah,
Now I just see it as an integrated part of me. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think it works amazingly for some people, and you know, I'm kind of I flow with it, and then I'm like, okay, but it's not my thing. It's not where I come from at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Again, hmm.
Yeah, I love that, and it's kind of very very similar to the space I'm in. It's like, you know, these things I think are a useful gateway for people. But I
Exactly.
think when people build their whole identities and way of being around these things, I'm thinking, whoa, is that limiting? Maybe it's not limiting
Mm.
for them, but it feels very limiting for me. And
Mm.
I love this idea of just being able to collapse the polarities and just be a being, vibrating life force energy and prana or
Mm.
chi or sexuality or whatever it is, and just be
Yeah.
in that open, free flowing space.
Exactly. And yeah, for me, when it comes down to it, like we are all rooted in love.
Mm,
collapsing of the polarities. I love that. Yeah.
mm,
And the commonalities between us as humans is way more than our differences.
mhm.
And I think that's what I love about myself. you
Yeah,
know,
I love that.
that I have a lot more in common with you, for example, than I have differences. Even
Mhm.
though, we look different. My facial hair isn't as grown out, and I'm very jealous of your mustache. But you know,
I'm sure I'm probably
um,
very jealous of your breasts or something.
oh, I know, but they're beautiful breasts. You should be.
I love that. Um, so yeah, so I want to speak into the kind of this curiosity of like the Irish psyche around sexuality and
Mm,
you know what because you've done work internationally as well, so it's like what do you notice in comparison internationally compared to the Irish psyche around sexuality? What do you feel are like the biggest maybe traumas, shameful pain points? Um, where do you think like the work needs to be done for Irish men and women?
mm. Whew. Um,
You don't have to
confidence.
figure it all out. You don't have to figure it
Yeah,
all out
yeah.
right now.
Jesus Christ,
We're going to be a few
PhD.
years.
Fuck's sake, Dara.
It is a PhD, I'm sure. Hope someone's doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, um, the big thing that I see with a lot of people who come to me is confidence, lack of
Confidence.
confidence in themselves, in their bodies, in their voice, knowing what they want. And then, historically, like the kind of, there's three main groups of people who come to me around not knowing their boundaries, consent, relational, navigating relationships with everybody and with themselves. And yeah, lots of history of abuse, sexual abuse and trauma, unwanted touch. And I think that's one of uh, the differences in Ireland is that there is an awful lot of recent trauma, sexual trauma. And, the um, religious input, I think, has decapitated, people who grew up in Ireland, the connection from God and then the voice and then the language gone, so colonialism and then, severance from the genitals, sexuality, the shame that's being put on this part of our bodies and then our land belonging, so I think for me, I see the difference in when I see someone on a continent where there is this occupying their full bodies and occupying their full self, and that's what I've noticed, and that's what I'm kind of a lot of my work is to support people to occupy their full selves, and specifically their sexuality and sensuality, occupying their right to be here, their roots, into their land, into themselves. And then when we're not rooted and when we don't have a connection to ourselves, we don't have a right to represent or voice what we need or want. So confidence, again, self-esteem, self-worth is so intricately woven into it. Um yeah,
Oh, beautiful. And then this kind of sexual agency and our power, that's
yeah.
what I'm really fascinated and curious around this kind of like power piece,
Mm,
being able to access this and reclaim almost our power and connection to the land and our sovereign right as people on our land and, you know, really finding those pieces and integrating them into a way where we can live a life that's actually authentic to our soul and our being, because I feel like we're all
mm,
born with this and then it's just lost. We're just
mm,
disempowered, and you kind of really said it there, loss of language, connection to our land, the religious kind of constraints that have been put on Irish people, and the shame, around touching yourself or connecting to yourself in a loving
mm,
and beautiful way. Yeah, I totally
mm.
agree with all that.
Yeah, and I think, as well as the shame, the religious systems of put on it, but also then, the abuse that came out that's still being revealed. I think that is, that drives people in the gut or something, so that
Yeah.
stabs the personal power piece, because
Mm.
we've lent our power up and out through, secondhand people in the middle, priests and things. So we've given them our power, and then they've come back and then, um, done these horrendous, violent acts. So, um, yeah, the personal power piece is huge. And
Mm.
I think with people who have Irish heritage and who live here in Ireland or from here, um, once we step back into that, step into and take our power, like with um with integrity. And I think that's a
Mm.
missing piece in our history. There's been a lack of integrity. But when we do it with integrity and honor, then we can co-create kind, compassionate, caring communities. And I
Mhm.
think that's the missing piece, that when we don't step into our full power with love and integrity, we're living, disembodied, disconnected from ourselves, and then from another, from our community, from our land, from our
Mm.
source. So
Mhm.
it's kind of creating world peace, Dara.
I love it.
It really
No,
is. It
uh,
feels.
100%. That's why I so love this work
Mm,
of sexuality in the body, because it for me it dissolves all barriers and boundaries. And it's a space of humanity, ultimately connecting to our common
yeah.
sense of humanity. We're all human beings. We all have bodies. Each body is
Mm,
different. Each body has its own medicine and gifts.
mm,
And how can we come together and collaborate and connect on a, compassion and loving level? You said it so beautifully. It's it's
mm.
it's really this piece around community, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're so interdependent. And I think we've nailed the whole disconnects, living lonely, nice, neat lives separate from each other. We've nailed that, and we've seen the product of that. So I think there is this return to ourselves and to community, and this
Mm,
is where we thrive. Yeah.
mm. No, it's such a wonderful, I think, time to be alive. Seeing people like you do the work you're
It
doing
is.
brings me so much hope. And there's so many great people on this island doing amazing work around the body and sexuality. And
Mm.
um, it's really exciting, I think, as Irish
Yeah.
people, to reclaim our power in many different avenues. I see it with the Irish language, we're having it with our
Yes.
body, now we're having it with like our indigenous medicine, mushrooms, it's really
Yeah.
like, I think it's like we're almost going through like a cultural renaissance in Ireland. Arts as well, and music, and on the world stage with so many different things.
Mm.
It's really a great time to be on this island, even though it's grey and rainy out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, there is a great sense of self valuing our gifts and our history, and also the fruits, the fruits of what our future, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm,
It's very exciting.
no. Thanks, Karen. It was so lovely to have you on the podcast. And like I said, bringing me so much hope to this island, that there's wonderful people like you in the world doing this great work. And yeah, before we finish, where can people find out about your work?
Yeah. So I have a website which is Karen Egan Cuan. So Cuan, as Gaeilge, is safe harbor. And also my Instagram handle is Karen Egan Cuan. And yeah, on Instagram I post about my workshops. I work on online one-to-one sessions, and in person I have a wee studio room here next to my house. So yeah, people can book a discovery call to see if um what I do may support them. And yeah, so I've got some collaborations workshop coming up this year, next year, and yeah.
Great. Oh, thanks so much. I feel like we probably could talk for hours more, and I'm sure
I
we
don't
will when
know.
we meet in person. I can't wait. um, but I'd say, yeah, it's really like this whole area is so fascinating, and it's a big area. I feel is so important when people are trying to explore their personal and spiritual development. And
Mm.
yeah, it's great that it's getting its time, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So great to be here, Darren. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks.